Welcome to episode 47 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to South African tennis player Kevin Anderson. Afternoon, Kevin. How are you doing today?
Adam, how are you? All good, thank you.
Yeah, good, thanks. How's the US been during this lockdown period we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think, just right off the bat, I feel very fortunate just where we are in Florida. Obviously, weather-wise, we're not sort of in apartment living where it's a little bit more crowded. So, that's one step. And of course, just looking at people around the world, I mean, really having a tough time with everything. So obviously our thoughts go out to them. Here, outside of not being able to, compete and play tennis and practice like I'm sort of usually am doing, definitely a bit more time at home. But there's been a lot of positives as well. I've spent a lot of time with my family. We just have a daughter who just turned 7 months a week ago. So that's going great, and spending time with my wife as well. I bought some gym equipment for the garage, so I've sort of been working out there. And just in the last week or so, just where we live, they did lift restrictions on tennis, so I've been able to get back out into the court, which was also really, really nice.
Oh, that's good. I don't think they've lifted that here in South Africa yet, but at least you're getting out there.
Yeah.
Kevin, let's go back to the start of your tennis career. You were obviously at St. Stithians, and you started playing at the age of 6.
Yeah, so tennis was always big in my family, and I've been playing since I can pretty much remember things. My dad coached me and my brother, right the way growing up, and he introduced us to the game. My mom played as well, but it was more my dad who really, was on court with us, sort of pretty much every day. We were lucky enough to have a court at our house, which made, getting out there and practicing really easily. And man, just ever since I can remember, my goal was always to keep improving and one day become a professional tennis player.
And was the competition between your brother and yourself quite fierce?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty lucky in that aspect too. He's only 18 months younger than myself, so we're able to compete at everything. And I just remember spending hours and hours on the court playing sort of every game you can imagine, whether it was normal sort of point play or mini tennis or any other game that we could sort of think of. So I think, just in South Africa, not having, the same sort of access to as many players as some other countries, I think having my brother who was, a tennis player as well, I think definitely helped me continually improve.
And Kevin, I know for a fact that St. Stithians are very proud of you. My stepdaughter's at school there, and they've always sort of sending out newsletters about you and your success. Were they very supportive of your tennis career when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, Saints was a great school and obviously very big into sporting. I think at the time a little bit, it was maybe a little bit of a difference between just sort of what our goals were as a family and sort of what my goals were. And I think, tennis in South Africa wasn't necessarily as big as some of the other sports. And I think it's a little bit different too. Specifically, if you look at the development when it comes to tennis, you have to start at such a young age. So, most kids who are potentially playing some of the other sports, you don't necessarily sometimes have to specialize as early. Whereas with, tennis, even from the time I was 9 or 10, pretty much that's all I was doing. I mean, I played some other sports, but I was really focused on tennis. So I think sometimes there's maybe some, difficulties just sort of coming to terms with what sort of my goals were. But I think as the school started sort of seeing some more of my success and the results I was having, were definitely supportive. And I feel a ton of support, especially since turning pro. And anytime I go back home, the school's been very welcoming, and I really enjoy going back. And I've often given talks to both the high school, the prep as well. It's definitely brings back a lot of memories. I spent a lot of time there. And when I'm back, you'll often see me practicing on either the boys or the girls courts.
And when you are there, do you get large crowds coming to watch you?
Sort of most of the time I'm back. Just for whatever reason, it's generally during like school holidays, and I don't really advertise too much. So anybody who's there, sometimes people will come out, but it's not being like an orchestrated event.
And Kevin, when did you realize that you were actually pretty good at this game and you were going to have the ability to turn pro? Because you obviously turned pro at the age of 17.
Yeah, I mean, so right from a young age, I think the goal, as I was mentioning, was to play professional tennis, and we were putting in a lot of hours, and I think, we were definitely improving and getting better. I was always the top in the country. And the few times that I went overseas, and exposed to sort of international tennis, I wouldn't say at that young age I sort of was blowing away international competition, but I think that was also just a function of I was quite intimidated as a kid when I went overseas, and this is where all the great tennis players were, and I think that was one of the challenges coming from South Africa. You just weren't exposed to that as much, but I think there was a part of me that, regardless of where I was, I knew where I wanted to be, and that's what just really kept me fueled and kept me motivated and working hard. I don't remember there being a point in time where I was like some sort of light bulb that went off. I just felt it's been such a long sort of path for me, and each and every single day, doing the best that I can, and just setting incremental goals for me. So yeah, I could point to when I turned pro, but there was, little steps before that. For me, it's just been something that I've tried to accomplish my whole life. And I think as I've taken those steps that have led me to where I am, I've sort of constantly, fueled the growth the belief that I have in myself too.
And Kevin, you obviously were playing Rafa Nadal on the junior circuit before turning pro. Has he always had the hand-eye thing that he does with his hands before he serves?
I don't recall the first time I played him and met him. We were both young. We were about 12 or so, and I honestly don't remember exactly. But I think seeing him early on in his teenage years, he's obviously had so much success at such a young age. I think he's kept his habits up, from then. And yeah, obviously it's pretty unique with him, but I think it serves a very valuable purpose to the way he plays the sport and the way he's able to reset for each and every single point. I think it sort of looks silly, but it definitely starts with his rituals and routines that he's kept up pretty much his whole career.
And do you have anything like that whether it's on the court or off the court, any rituals that you have that help you with luck?
I mean, I don't really see it necessarily as luck. I think it's more when you find yourself in these big moments, when you're out on the court, having rituals and routines, I think, is vitally important, because I feel like it helps settle you a little bit, and it brings your body back to doing something that's very comfortable. For instance, I pretty much bounce the ball on my serve the same amount of times. I go through pretty much the same routine, and that's the way I practice too. The only thing I do, which is kind of funny, is obviously Nadal, people give him a hard time with his water bottles. I think I've been doing my own version of the water bottles actually long before he was, but right now I haven't had the same sort of exposure as he has, so mine is sort of kept under the limelight a little bit.
And Kevin, you won your first tournament on the ATP tour back here in South Africa. That must have been a very special moment for you.
Yeah, it was really special. Winning my first event and doing so, 10, 15 minutes of where I grew up, in South Africa, and just having all of the fans and support there, and also with my whole family there too. It was definitely a very special place to win my first tournament, one that I definitely remember very fondly. Unfortunately, that was the last year that we hosted tournaments. So I haven't had the chance to come back to defend it, but it still brings back a lot of great memories. And
since then, I mean, you've had great success on the court. Obviously, 2017, you were in the US Open final. But more specifically, I'd love to chat to you about 2018 in Wimbledon. Firstly, the game against Federer. You were 2 sets down. You were match point down. Chat to us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, I wasn't really thinking too much about I wasn't thinking about anything else other than just saving that point to, I didn't want to lose my serve, and obviously it being match point as well. Um, and then, getting through that game and getting to the tiebreak, and then I think it was a tiebreak, and, winning that. And I think I did a really good job throughout the rest of the match of just staying in the moment. And that's something I'd been working really hard on, just from a mentality standpoint. But people do ask me, being down 2 sets to live match point, well, you think you're winning the match? And honestly, all I was thinking about then was just, winning the point just in that moment. And I sort of kept that mindset out throughout the rest of the match. Um, you know, Obviously I was in a very difficult position, and the reality is more times or not, you sort of lose that match after being down 2 sets to live and facing match point. But that was the time that I was able to come back and obviously get a great win.
I mean, it's not as if you were facing a medium-ranked player. You were up against probably one of the best players of all time in Federer. I mean, that must be a huge feather in your cap as a highlight in your career.
No, it definitely is. I mean, I think getting through that and doing so at Wimbledon quarterfinals was, a huge stage. And I think just for me, just as satisfying was, the next match, which was sort of the marathon match over almost 6.5 hours, and being able to back it up and take that another step and put myself in the finals.
Yeah.
Obviously, it would have been great to win one more match, but I think definitely those two matches and that period of time in the tournament, there was a lot that was going on. I was on court for a lot of hours. There was a lot of things I had to deal with, and it's definitely, I'm very proud of what I was able to achieve, and very motivated to put myself back in that position to try to go one step further.
Yeah, I mean, I remember those matches very well, like they were yesterday. I think the whole of South Africa will probably remember them. I mean, that match against Isner, it was just ridiculous. Did you guys think it would ever stop?
Yeah, I mean, I've played John a number of times. We go back to college years. He's had, a lot of success on the tour, and I've almost seen him as a bit of a rival, and our careers sort of started at a very similar time. Once we finished collegiate tennis, and yeah, it's always tricky playing him. I mean, his serve is really one of the best serves in the history of the game, and what he's able to do with it makes it very tough from a returner. And obviously, my serve is also one of the best in the game, so it was always going to be a tough matchup, and one that came down to a few points here and there. And yeah, I mean, I remember after in the third set, I think I was either up a break, and I felt I was in a pretty good position, and I let that sort of slip away, and being down 2 sets to 1, and I think I did a really good job of just keeping my my mindset and keeping my calm, and getting through that fourth set. And throughout the fifth set, I feel like even though it was going even, I did feel like I had a little bit of an extra edge, a little bit more momentum, and that I was holding serve pretty comfortably throughout, and I felt like I was slowly starting to get a few more looks in his serve. And it was frustrating at times because I felt I had a bunch of 15-30s, love 30s, and just couldn't quite get over the edge. He was playing, great tennis, and he's a great competitor himself. But again, that was an example of just staying in the moment. Didn't really have the luxury of serving second and always having to serve to stay in the match for an extended period of time. You really had to stay in the moment, and played a pretty crazy game to break him eventually, and obviously very, very pleased to serve it out then.
And Kevin, tell us about that moment that you walked onto the court in the final against Djokovic. Again, another phenomenal player. How was that? I mean, that must have been a very special moment. Yes, the US Open it's an amazing tournament to be in a final at. Wimbledon's got to be a bit more than that, though.
I mean, I definitely remember walking out into center court at Wimbledon for the finals, and I think it was a moment that I wanted to sort of just recognize. There was a result of many years and thousands of hours to get there. It was a little bit tricky in the sense that because of my previous two matches, especially the match with John just before, I'd say the 24 hours leading up to the match was tough. there was at times I didn't even know if I was going to be able to take the court. I was struggling quite a bit physically, and it was just a weird position to be in, knowing that I'm going out there and playing in the finals, a match that I want to win, sort of, and then having these fleeting thoughts of, man, you physically, are you going to be able to get there? Are you going to be able to, finish the match? So that was a little bit, tough. But there's no doubt I remember specifically going out there, and unfortunately, nerves definitely got the better of me in the finals, because physically I actually felt much better than I thought I was going to feel. And in the third set, when I finally settled down, I gave myself a really good shot of taking it to the fourth set at least. I think I had maybe 4 or 5 set points that he was able to hold off. All in all, obviously a very, very special experience being out there. A lot of great moments throughout those 2 weeks. And I think most importantly, just that experience it gave me. Obviously, things are a little bit tough now. We're not sure when we're returning, but the goal is definitely to put myself in that position again.
Kevin, you've had some amazing moments in your career. You were to world number 5. You've been to the Beijing Olympics, obviously the US Open final, the Wimbledon final. Is there a moment in your career that's been the standout moment that you look back and think, wow, I'm actually bloody proud of myself for doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're talking about, those couple of matches at Wimbledon were very special to me. Beating Federer and then going onto center court and playing a 6.5 hour match in the Wimbledon semifinals and getting through that. I think that moment of winning, not just the fact that we're in the semifinals, but just the match itself. That's the longest match I've ever played. And, there was a lot of stuff going on. I think the relief and the emotions that I felt, were pretty unique to that. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of moments that I'm proud of throughout my career. There's a lot I feel like I've accomplished that I could mention, but I think that one would be, definitely up there.
Kevin, I read an article a couple of weeks ago where 2 of the top players kind of broke down everyone's game and said, Murray's the best at backhand return and et cetera, and one of them mentioned that yours was the best serve. Who's been your toughest opponent, or sort of what's your perfect player in terms of guys that you've played against?
Yeah, I mean, I saw that going around, and it was an interesting one. It's pretty tough to choose from. I mean, there's definitely, the way people play against different opponents, slightly different matchups will give you slightly different opinions, I feel. I mean, in terms of like the movement, obviously it's hard to look by the top few guys. I think for me, the people who I play against, I'd say Novak from the movement standpoint. I'd take Federer's forehand and his slice backhand, the way he's able to mix it up. Novak's backhand. In terms of mentality and physicality, I definitely take Nadal in that. I think he's sort of led the way for a long period of time. Serve-wise, as I mentioned earlier, I think John's got a really, really difficult to serve to read. I mean, obviously his height, he uses it very effectively. But it's interesting. There's nobody who sort of dominates all of that. I think there's different areas that you could look in terms of offense and defense and the way that the game's played. But yeah, I saw that going on. It was a pretty interesting take on things.
Yeah. Kevin, you've been in the US for a long time now. Where do you consider home? Is South Africa still very much home for you?
Yeah, I mean, every time I go back, there's so many emotions that sort of elicit, and just that sense of, that's where I grew up. You feel so comfortable. Everything feels like home there. I mean, there's no doubt. At the same time, obviously, I have been living in the US, and we've been in Florida, Southeast Florida for quite a few years now. My wife's American. I've met a lot of people, family, friends here. So I really feel like it's a bit of both. To answer it, but without question, I feel like identifying just within the culture of South Africa, I think that will always be with me.
Yeah. And Kevin, just in closing, I mean, it's been great chatting to you, and we could chat all evening. When you were growing up, did you have a specific player that you looked up that you could say, okay, I'm looking up towards him, much like a lot of players look up towards you now? And what advice would you give to youngsters to say, you looked up to whoever it was, and this is how I got to where I am now? What would you say for those youngsters that are looking up to you?
Yeah, I mean, so I looked up to Pete Sampras. He was my idol growing up. I didn't end up playing anything like him really, but I think I just admired his commitment to success and his his unwavering belief in himself. And he was, up until recently, I think many regarded as one of the greatest players of all time. And I feel like it's just somebody who I really enjoyed watching. Yeah, I mean, it really means a lot that hopefully there's kids who sort of look up to me as their role model. Even if you don't sort of play like me, I feel like the things that I try to put out there as much as I can is my competitiveness, the way I compete, the way I play the game, just sort of similar to the way I saw, Pete playing, not necessarily the way he played, but just the way he conducted himself.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just also sort of I alluded to a little bit earlier, for a lot of tennis players in South Africa, because tennis is such an international sport right now, and South Africa is a little bit isolated, you really have to believe in yourself as much as possible. And even though the tennis world can seem very big when you don't really know it, you don't think these guys, from these different countries are, so special that you can't compete with them. You really have to believe in yourself. You have to keep learning, keep growing, and keep improving. But the biggest thing I'd say is, when you get on that court, you have to really give yourself the best chance at succeeding. And that's something that, honestly, took me a little bit of time to get used to. I think I had the game, I had the skills. It's not like I didn't believe in myself. Just when you don't see these guys, you see them on TV, and now they're standing on the other side of the net. It did take you a little bit of getting used to. So the quicker you can bridge that gap, I think it'll definitely work in your favor.
Yeah. Brilliant, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining us this
Anytime.
afternoon. Sport SA Daily Diary. It's been great chatting to you.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck when you do get back on the court, and hopefully
you.
we'll see you in another Wimbledon final.
Excellent. Keep well, Adam.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Don't miss tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we'll be chatting to American cyclist George Hincapie.